In this tutorial, I want to show you 3 different ways to create contact sheets for your clients using Lightroom, Capture One, and Photoshop. Now, when you're doing a shoot and you want to deliver images to your clients, and that's proofs of the shots, there's a few different ways you can go about it. Now, if you have a portrait client where they've paid for the sitting and then you want to on-sell the images, you can do this in a couple of ways. Now, what I do if it's a portrait client, they might have paid for the sitting fee, then what I do is I deliver the proofs first. The reason I supply a proof sheet over something like individual file downloads like this is you want to make it as easy as possible for your client to select the images and see everything at a glance. So in this instance, I've got thousands of images and there are a number of people in different departments that are needing to look over the images and collaborate on these files. So in this instance, what I've done is I've uploaded low-res proof versions of the entire shoot, and I've edited out any blinkers and ones where maybe one of the lights didn't go off or the shot just didn't look good, and I've just given them my selects of the images. But to make it much easier for the client, what I've also created is a PDF contact sheet for the client so that they can easily and quickly browse through the files. And this is what it looks like. So here is a proof sheet as a PDF. So all the images are laid up neatly. The file number is underneath. I've got my website details on the side, and I can also choose, if I want to, I could have copyright information, a watermark across the center of the image. I could also have different captions under each image as well. So you've got lots of different options, and this is I think a really good way to share the images with your clients. So there is, you can create these PDF contact sheets using Lightroom, Capture One, or Photoshop, and it's a really simple process and I think a really effective way to deliver proofs to your clients. So let's have a look at how you do that. To create a proof sheet using Lightroom, what you first need to do is select the images that you want to proof. So here I have my folder selected, and I select all the images, Command A. So I've got all the images selected that I want to proof. So you might have 5, 10, 20, 100, it doesn't matter. This works for any number. Okay, so I've got all my images selected, and I'm going to go all the way across to the print module in Lightroom, select that. Now, you can see already I've got an example up here. So basically what you can see is down here you've got a template browser that allows you to change the setup for how you want your images to be loaded up. So this also applies to laying up images for printing, but for this we're going to be looking at creating a proofs browser. So you've got lots of different options here, and then that's on the right hand side, and on the left hand side you've got options to actually tweak that to create the look that you want. And what's really handy in Lightroom is you can also, once you've found a style and a template that suits and you've tweaked it a little bit, you can actually create a user preset and save that. So that's what I've done here. So if I come over to a 5x8 contact sheet, you can see that I've got all the images loaded up here, and I can come and select the single image contact sheet from the layout style. Now, the next drop-down menu you have is for image settings. So you can come in and you can have zoom to fill, which means that each image will be scaled up to fill that space. I usually don't check that. You can have rotate to fit. That is worth checking if you've got images that are both horizontal and vertical, so that they'll all be nice and neatly arranged on the page. All right, the next drop-down menu is the layout. So you can change the left and right margins from the default, which is 0.25 inches. So if you want to have more space on the left or more space on the right, you can tweak that. I like to leave it at the default setting. The page grid is you can change the number of images that you want. So, and this is where you can scale this to suit the style of images and the size of images. So if I've got 3 rows across, and I can have, let me go 2, 3, 4 across, and three columns and 4 rows. That seems to work nicely for the size of images that I have and the fact that they're all a vertical format. So that fits really nicely as a proof sheet. I can then change the cell spacing if I want to, but I'm going to have them to fit nice and snugly there. And you can also change the cell size, but I'm going to have them to fit. Again, this format seems to work for me. Now, the other thing you can have is the guides. You can add little squares to your images so that like you can have little boxes around them. I prefer a cleaner look, so I tend to uncheck that so that it's a nice white border, but there aren't any extra lines. I like my proof sheets to look nice and clean. The next option, you can change the color of your background paper. I think photos look best with a white background, so I'm going to keep that unchecked. The next one is this is the identity plate, which is you can add your name here to the image and you can move that around wherever you want. So like you might want to have that in the middle there, or you can actually change the angle. So I can rotate it 90 degrees and I can have it just off to the side there. And you can also change the opacity of that. So you can see that there, and you can also make it larger if you want. So that's something that you might want to do. The other thing you can add, which I think, again, if you're sending a proof sheet off to, say, a portrait client who, again, has paid for the sitting fee, but they haven't purchased images, I think it's a good idea to watermark your proof sheets as well, because some clients might take advantage of you and just may choose to help themselves to the image without paying you for them. So you can check the watermarking box there, and then you've got a little drop-down menu here and you can add your watermarks. So I already have one created, which is proofs only, and you can see that there. Let me just bring up the, so you can just see that slightly there, but I can change the opacity if I come down all the way down to edit watermark. All right, you can see the proofs only there, so I can increase the size and the opacity of that. And you can see that because the writing is white, it doesn't really show up that well. So I can also change the color. I can change it to black or red, something that makes it stand out, and then I can play with the proportion of that if you want to watermark your image so that the client can still see the expression and the pose and look of the shot, but there's not much that they can do with the images. So whether you watermark the proof sheets or not, that's entirely up to you, but you've got the option of doing that, and you can configure that in any way you like. You can also change, you've got this option here to change the location of where you put your watermark. It can be in the middle, bottom, wherever you want, and size and color. So that's all customizable there. And then you can save that as a preset if you like. The other option that you have is that you can add your logo. So if you wanted to, instead of having the watermark with writing or your website, you can add a logo to each of the images. And to do that, again, just come down to this watermarking drop down menu, and you can come into edit watermarks, and you've got two different watermark styles. So you've got text, and if you click on the graphic, it'll come to an option where you can search for your logo. So make sure it's somewhere where you can find it. So here's my GM logo here as a PNG. I can select choose, and you can see there that it's placed my logo over the image. And again, I can change the opacity, and I can also change the size, and I can change the location of where I want my logo. So let's just say I want to place it there in the corner, and I'll just knock back the opacity and change the proportion, or I might want to just have it in the middle. I think I'll have it in the corner there, and that just watermarks each image with my logo, and I can press save. And if I like that, I'll keep that as a template. So I'll call that GM logo 2018 create. And so now you can see that I've created a proof sheet with the logo on each image. The other thing that you can choose to include is under each image you can have either the actual file name, which is the name and the number, which is great for a reference, so that when clients are ordering their images they know the exact file number that they want to order. You can also, if you don't want to include the file number, it may be for a proof sheet that you're keeping for your own records, you might want to include the date it was shot. Okay, so it'll have the date underneath, or you could have the equipment. So now it's got that it was shot on the Canon 5D Mark IV, and the lens and the focal length that I shot and the aperture. Or you could have exposure, custom text, so you could name it something, whatever you want, or a caption which maybe describes the person. You can also change the font size, so you might want to have large font. Let's go back to the file name, so you can change the size of the font, and that's pretty much it for what you want to change. Now, once you've created the look that you want, you can now output that to a PDF. And the way you do that is to come down to this little checkbox here, that not print, but printer. And you click on that, and you'll get a little dialog box that comes up. And what you want to do is ignore all of these settings and come down to this drop-down menu that says PDF, and come down to save as PDF, and you'll get another little dialog box. So what you want to do is have a location that you want to send the images to. So I think I'll send them to contact sheets, and you can see that I've already created a few here. And then you've got the option to name it whatever you want. So obviously you can name it with the job name or your name or whatever it is that you want to do. So I'm going to call it Neighbours 2018, and we'll call this one Lightroom, and that's what it's going to be saved as. And then you've got to you can also put a title on the PDF document. So I'll name it the same thing, and then just hit save. And you can see that it's preparing the job, and job done. If I come into my desktop, contact sheets, Neighbours 2018 Lightroom, open it up, and there it is as a PDF. And you can see that it's got the name, file number, my logo's there on the side, and there are all the images there, and you can deliver that to the client as a PDF, which is a great way to deliver the files. Okay, so to create a proof sheet using Photoshop, here's what you need to do. So you want to make sure that the files that you want to proof are in their own folder in a location where you can easily access them. So I'm going to go to File and then come down to Automate, Contact Sheet. Click on that. Okay, now we want to choose the folder that I want to proof. So I've go to my desktop and I've created a folder called PS Proofs. So they're the images that I want to proof. So I'll select those and hit open. Now you can configure it in this little document box here. So I've created the unit of measure in inches. My width is going to be 8 inches and my height is 10 inches. And I'm outputting to the color profile sRGB because that is what looks the best on most computers. It's the best general color profile to view images on. So these are the default settings. I've tweaked the width and height, but I think 8x10 is a good size for proof sheets. And then you want to configure the thumbnails. So I've got them going down first. So when it creates the proofs, it'll run down, and then each column it'll go to the next column and then the next column. So I'm creating a proof sheet that is 3 columns across and 3 rows. And check auto spacing and also rotate for best fit. Again, that's if you've got vertical images or horizontal images. I'm also using the file name as a caption, and you can also change the font if you like. So if you've got some sort of font that suits your corporate ID, then you might want to choose that, or whatever font that you like to use, and then you can have regular or bold. I think regular is easiest to read, and I think 12 points is a good size for most people to read. Once you've done all that, you just hit OK, and Photoshop automates it. So, and it should do it fairly quickly. Okay, so here are the images. So I've got page 1 and page 2, and it might be a matter of tweaking the images. Now, there was one more checkbox that I didn't hit, and that was to flatten the image. So what I've got is each of the proof sheets has now been created in layers, which means if you want to, you can go in and edit any of the text. So that's the advantage of leaving it as the layers unchecked. The other advantage of not flattening the layers when you're doing something in Photoshop is you can add an extra layer and you can now add some extra annotations to your proof sheet. So let's say that you're sending this proof sheet to a client, but you want to let them know which of the images are your preferred ones. So you could easily just come in and say, okay, these are my selects for the images, and that's on its own separate layer. And then you can flatten that image afterwards if you want. And I'm going to also make my selects here. So that's, I like this one and I like that one. And then I can come to layer, flatten image. And then it's a two-step process in Photoshop. You can come into File, Automate, PDF Presentation, and you want to check Add Open Files, and then Save. And you can name that. So again, I'm going to save it to my folder Contact Sheets, and I'll call this Photoshop PDF, and hit Save. And then you've got options of how you want to output that. So for a proof sheet, I've gone with the smallest file size, and this is the best. It'll tell you in the description, use these settings to create a PDF document best suited for on-screen display, email, and the internet. So that means you can share it easily online without it being super huge. Which can be a pain, or if it was something that you wanted to print out, then you could go with the option of higher quality. But for this, as a proof sheet, I'm going to go with the smaller size and hit Save as PDF. And if I go to my contact sheets now, there's the Photoshop PDF. And there it is. And you can see that the resolution isn't that fantastic, but it's perfect for this sort of stuff. And I've even got my extra little ticks there that I've added in. Now, if you want to skip the step of having to flatten layers and things like that, the other option that you can do, let me just get rid of these, is you can automate contact sheet. There's a little checkbox that allows you to flatten the images, flatten all layers. So you can just check that and it'll automate it, and it'll give you the contact sheets as one layer without all those individual layers. So you can see that it's now just one layer for that. So that's the option. So you've got two options there. So that is how to create a contact sheet using Photoshop. All right, and finally, you can create a contact sheet using Capture One. So I have selected all the images. I've actually created a folder that I've put all the images that I want to proof in, have selected that. Okay, so there's all the images that I want to proof. Make sure that they're all selected. And then we come down to File, Print. Okay, and you'll get a little drop down menu, and again you've got the options. It's very similar to how Lightroom does it. So you've got options. So I've got my paper size, A4. Okay, you can sharpen if you want, and then you've got all these other little drop down menus. So again, you can play with your left and right margins if you want to add those in, top, bottom. And you've got your rows that you can play with. So you can see that as I add more rows, it'll change the orientation. So I'm going to go back to the 3x3, which I think fits nicely. You can change the spacing in between the rows if you want more space around them. All right, or you can have them nice and snug, and you've got the option to change the cell height. So there's lots of different settings that you can tweak there. And you can also, again, like Lightroom, change from file name, or you can have a description if you want. So I'm going to stick to file name, and again, you can change the font if you want. So if I click on those little 3 dots right next to the font, you get a little dialog box that comes up, and you can change the font, and you can also change the size of the font as well for the caption there. And then you also have the option to add an image as a watermark, or you can have text. So for the text, I've created, and it gives you a space to, you can change the text to whatever you want. So I can either have the copyright Gina Milicia, or I can have an image there, or you can have nothing at all. So whatever you prefer. So I'm going to stick with the image. I quite like that. And again, you can change the opacity, and you can scale that up or down. And you can also change the position of it by changing the sliders. So I'm going to bring it down in size, and we'll put it there in the left hand corner there. So that pretty much covers the look and vibe. And you can also, if you like the setup and it's something that you do regularly, you can create your own template. So I've created my template, and I've named it Gina Milicia 3x3V, the V being for vertical. There are also built-in templates that you can use. So there's 2x2, 1x3. You've got lots of different options there. So I'm going to go back to my 3x3, and it's always a good idea to create your own templates. It just speeds up the workflow. Once you're happy with how everything looks, to export the contact sheet in Capture One, you come down to this little button here which says print. Click on that, and you'll get another little drop down menu. And what you want to do is ignore all the printer settings and come down to this little drop down menu with PDF, and you click on Save as PDF, and again you'll get the option to check where you want to save it to and how you want to name it. So let's name this Capture One CS Demo, and I'll also title the actual PDF the same, and it's going to go into my contact sheet folder. Click on Save, and then you can see the activities here. It's rendering. Done. And if I open up my contact sheets folder, there it is, Capture One CS Demo. Open that up, and there it is. Got my little logo in the corner. And you can see that when I created my font size, it's just a little bit too large. So what I'm going to do is come back and reconfigure that so that it all fits. So my font size, 14 points, is too big for the images. It doesn't quite fit. So I'm going to change it to 12 points. And I'll go back to print again. PDF. Save as PDF, and I'll just name it the same thing, and it'll overwrite that original one that I just did. Save. Yes, I want to replace. There's the activity box. And if we come back in, there it is there. It fits in nicely. So there it is as a PDF. And I think that's a great way to deliver a contact sheet, PDF version of contact sheets for your clients. So that's 3 ways to create contact sheets using Lightroom, Photoshop, and Capture One.